The verdict is in. 47-year-old Bernard Fish was found guilty on all 7 charges, including armed robbery and impersonating a police officer. There's no word yet on a sentencing date, but Fish faces a possible sentence of up to life in prison. TV6's Sarah Blakely has been following the trial all week, and she joins us live from the Houghton Hancock Bureau with more. Sarah?
Greg, this was a really difficult trial to follow throughout the week, only because there were so many people telling the same story, but in a different way. Now, it seemed that a different story of this armed robbery was coming out every other month since it happened over a year ago, so it was really hard to keep things straight. But today, the jury had to decide whether or not they thought that the armed robbery was real or a setup, and whether Bernard Fish was guilty or not.
It was an interesting case to follow throughout the week, with over a dozen witnesses testifying multiple versions of the same story and trying to keep all the facts straight. Bernard Fish and his nephew Donovan Wapus robbed 2 men in Wotton on August 1st, 2013, after which Fish led police on a 3-month chase around the country before being caught. Today, Fish was found guilty of 2 counts of armed robbery, 2 counts of extortion, 1 count of impersonating a federal officer, and 2 counts of unlawful imprisonment. Fish told police upon arrest that the robbery was a setup between him and one of the victims, Jim Jackson, and that explains why he wasn't worried about being on the surveillance cameras around the house. But the prosecution argued otherwise.
Because he thought he was robbing an illegal drug operation, where nobody's going to call the cops because then they'd be in as much trouble as him.
The defense argued that if it was a real robbery, Fish wouldn't have stuck around the house for so long.
He was there for 40 minutes. You don't do an armed robbery for 40 minutes. That's ridiculous.
Confusion in the courtroom set in as Fish changed parts of his story while on the stand. Originally, he told police the setup was to get money from the victim's father, but testified in court a different story.
The first story was, I walked in front of the cameras with Jerk and Zawada. I was walking forth in front of the cameras because I wanted Heiser's dad to see it. We were here to set him up, start going out of him. Well, now, it's so Peter doesn't think Jamie ripped him off.
But after 3.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all charges.
You know, unfortunately, time only permits so much of this information from this trial to be told on TV. There were so many bits and pieces to this story that we just couldn't really get into every single little piece. And it was really hard to keep everybody's story straight because at some point, almost everybody involved in this case had lied to police along the lines. There were actually even 4 more witnesses subpoenaed to testify this week that didn't show up, one of which was the other victim in the case. Now, Bernard Fish, as for Bernard Fish, his sentencing date hasn't been set yet, but that life sentence does come from the 2 armed robbery counts that were against him. So I guess we will see what happens in the next month or so. But for now, reporting live in Houghton, Sarah Blakely, TV6 News.